I defunded Planned Parenthood more than 4 years ago, long before any of these videos came out.
Prosecute Planned Parenthood for any criminal violations.
Defund Planned Parenthood.
Absolutely, we need to defund Planned Parenthood.
As governor of the state of Florida, I defunded Planned Parenthood.
GOP presidential candidates making it clear at the debates they would defund Planned Parenthood as another disturbing video is released. And Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, launching a new ad defending the group and accusing Republicans of waging war on women.
Republicans like Scott Walker and Jeb Bush are calling to defund Planned Parenthood. If this feels like a full-on assault on women's health, that's because it is.
Two very different views. So which message resonates with voters and taxpayers? Hi, everybody. I'm David Azen. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus to find out with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Elizabeth McDonald, Sabrina Schaefer, John Tamny, and Bruce Japsen. EMAC defunded?
Yes, defund it. This is a disgrace. They dishonor themselves. It is not fetal tissue. These are babies. And listen, I am for women's health. I am for over-the-counter birth control without a doctor's prescription. But what Planned Parenthood did here is abhorrent. And so there are other women's community health centers that can handle mammograms, cervical cancer, screenings and the like. I think that Planned Parenthood has hit the end of the road right now.
All right, Bruce, defund it or keep the funding coming?
I think you need to keep the funding going. Now, listen, when we had the Obamacare debate and a few people lost their health plans, people were saying if the president lied because he said you couldn't keep your doctor. Now what you're saying is you had 700 health centers and you have women and men going to these centers for cancer screenings and whatnot, and you're saying if they like their health center, they can't keep it.
Well, Sabrina, what you have that really changed the conversation this week was a change in language from Planned Parenthood itself in these sting videos. We had a new video out where instead of using this word tissue for describing what they're taking from the fetuses, they used another word. Let's just play the tape and get your reaction.
So if we alter our process and we are able to obtain intact fetal cadavers, then we can make it part of the budget that any dissections are this, and splitting the specimens into different shipments is this. I mean, it's all just a matter of line items.
Sabrina, when voters listen to that language, it kind of changes the conversation, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think anyone who's had a child can't imagine it being talked about as a line item. It's disgusting. But I think EMAX makes a really important point, which is if we really care about women's health, then we should be focused on, A, defunding Planned Parenthood, because there's plenty of other women's health organizations out there that can address real issues that are, especially for low-income women. And we should be talking about repealing and replacing Obamacare so we have an actual market for health care and we can provide affordable treatments and procedures for women.
Steve, people's reaction to this new video that came out this week is so strong, so dramatic, but there are occasions where taxpayers are forced to pay out of their taxes for things they don't believe in, like war, for example, another case of taking human life.
Well, in the case of Planned Parenthood, it's been the policy of the federal government, thanks to Congress since the 1970s, that the federal government does not fund abortions. It may allow it, but it can't fund it. Planned Parenthood is a roundabout way of doing it. Money is fungible. So this just goes to the spirit of the 1970s law, no funding for abortions.
Okay.
And Schaefer and Lizzie are right here. Sabrina are right. You have health centers that can use this money for things like cancer, not abortion.
So according to Steve, John Tamny, the situation is pretty simple. They violated the rules they were supposed to operate by.
Yeah, even if they didn't violate the rules, you should defund it simply because government should have no opinion one way or the other about abortion. That's the first thing. Secondly, Planned Parenthood wouldn't disappear if it were defunded. It would still be a vibrant private organization, and that's the point. Those who support Planned Parenthood should not want the federal government funding it simply because it discredits in the eyes of voters.
Rich,
this should be a private thing.
I don't know whether it would survive if federal government would stop. Federal government funding, by the way, $528 million last year, $540 million the year before, $542 million the year before that. And you look at their annual report, the overall money that they get outside of the federal government is small in comparison. So I'm not sure they would survive without federal funding.
Well, it would be an interesting test, wouldn't it? Let Barbara Boxer go out and fundraise for something that she believes in, that I think majority of Americans find, and a growing majority find, absolutely disgusting. And to Hillary Clinton's point about a war on women, I'm assuming that half the aborted fetuses are probably are baby girls. We know that the majority of fetuses aborted around the world are baby girls.
Yeah, that's a great point. But EMAC, you know, we're always talking about how the states are kind of the testing grounds for what the feds do. They're kind of the petri dishes. In this case, it looks like the states already are starting to move to do the defunding themselves. We've got 3 states doing that, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's what reports indicate. It's Alabama, Louisiana, and New Hampshire. Wow, battleground states certainly is New Hampshire. You know, President Dwight Eisenhower said, you know, birth control is not the government's business. And then John F. Kennedy said, you know what, we're going to make it family planning part of foreign aid. And then the Vatican said, you know, up through in the mid-60s, that birth control was okay by the Gospels, but then turned around in 1968. Yeah. I'm for basically making abortion obsolete via over-the-counter birth control without a doctor's prescription.
Well, but Bruce, I think EMAC got to the point here. The intrusion of federal government into every aspect of our life, even aspects of our life that we strongly, emotionally, sometimes religiously disagree with. Isn't that what this is about?
Well, I think there's also an access issue. If you have low-income people going to a center to get education about whether to have a child or not, or whether to get a pap smear and so forth, and they get outpatient services that prevents a hospitalization down the road, isn't that a good thing?
But
and
that's
something
not
that
what we're
saves
talking about.
taxpayers'
We're talking about picking apart human bodies, Sabrina, and whether or not that's a total violation of the letter and the intention of the law, as Steve said.
Right, and to John's point, look, no one is saying that Planned Parenthood is going to have to be shut down. We're just saying that you can't necessarily rely on the American people to support it. And we have to remember, the United States is a very large and diverse and varied country with different traditions and religious backgrounds and cultural backgrounds. There's no reason that government should be involved with this or funding an organization like this whose main focus is abortions. And you know, from a political perspective, Democrats have absolutely no problem raising money when it comes to women.
By the way, they claim, Planned Parenthood claims that about 3% of their budget goes to abortions. That's what they claim. It may not be true. You know, you can always fudge with figures. But Steve, you've seen the financial report of Planned Parenthood, the overall financial report, and you've seen how much money they get from the feds, about $500 million a year. I don't think they can survive without that federal money.
Well, we should see and find out. And if Planned Parenthood wants federal money, then it should drop their abortion activities. Again, the federal government since the 1970s has said no to federal funding of abortions. And Planned Parenthood is a way around that. Got to stop it.
John, my point is, if it couldn't survive without federal government, maybe there's a reason it couldn't survive. Maybe the services they provide do not need the federal taxpayer support.
And you may well be right. And I would just add, whether Planned Parenthood is involved with abortion or not, even if it stops aborting altogether, it should still not be funded by the federal government. The federal government has limited powers. It should have no role in what people do here. This is states' rights at best.
Okay. Finally, Rich, what about the issue, though, the tax issue of there are things that taxpayers have to fund that they don't agree with. It's happened before. The defense is the easiest example because that involves taking human life on occasion. Isn't this another example of this? And if you defund Planned Parenthood, you'd have to defund taxes going to the military.
That's a completely false argument, and you know it, and you're raising it just to get my reaction.
That's exactly true.
But it's a completely false argument because the Constitution calls for the protection of the United States, and you know, taking innocent fetal lives is not in any way constitutionally or required of the taxpayers to fund it.
Okay, that's got to be the last word. Thank you very much. Rich is on to me. Coming up, the soundbite from the debate that some here say remind them of what Ronald Reagan said and did to bring back the American dream.
For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again.